Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Impactors Out Loud. Have you had this problem? And I'm sure you have because we all do, right? Where you have the desire to do something or stop doing something, but your brain just won't let you implement. Well, today we have Kam Knight with us, and he's going to talk to us about how we can get our brain to be in sync with our desires. Kam, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Yes, so
Sure.
my name is Kam Knight. I'm a coach, international speaker, and author of a dozen books in the area of mental performance, such as reading, memory, and concentration, as well as personal mastery, such as self-talk, visualization, and goal setting. And as far back as I can remember, I've been a fairly driven individual. It's kind of hard not to be living in a culture and society with so much personal development content and everyone telling you to do more, be your best self, and reach for the stars. And as a result, I've always wanted to do more and have more and be more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like I fell short or missed the mark, or the success was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Like, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it.
Right.
And at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I heard were your typical personal development responses like, you need to have motivation, or you need to be disciplined, or you need better beliefs. And those are all part of the equation, though I always thought there was more to it. And over the past 15 years, that question lingered in my mind. Every time I felt stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And so the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, I started to learn about the complexity of the brain. And over time, I began to realize, hey, wait a minute. There's a part of our mind that's built to keep us from growing and making progress. There's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. And I call this part resistance, and it's a brick wall that we hit anytime we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. And this is where this unalignment comes up.
Right. But isn't that weird though, that there is a part of our brain that prevents us from doing the things that will suit us best, that will take us to
Yeah.
the next level and satisfy our desires? Like, isn't that contradictory to what our brain is actually supposed to do?
It is. And sometimes I tell people that whoever created humanity, whether it was God,
You're right.
aliens, or evolution,
Mhm.
must have been really sick and twisted, because how could they do this to us? How could they have a brain that creates wants and desires and then keeps
Mhm.
us from achieving it? Like, our own
Right.
brain will release motivation and inspiration for us to go after and do something.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it'll release feelings that'll hold us back and keep us from doing it.
Right.
And then we're stuck and we're in this pain of like, we want this, but we can't have it. So it is crazy. But it's not so crazy if you really think about it. And that's because the part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it works separately and independent of the part that actually allows you to act on that desire. And this is really important. So I'm going to say that again. The part of the brain that allows you, that creates wants and desires, work separately and independent of the part that allows you to act on that desire. So you have one part of your brain that's creating wants, and it's creating wants one after another.
Yeah.
And it doesn't check to see if you have the time, energy, and resources to do the thing. And that's not its responsibility. Its responsibility is just to create wants and desires. But then you have this other part of the brain, which I call resistance, that checks to see if that wants is safe or worth doing. And this is the part that checks to see if you have the time, energy, and resources. So when you understand that your brain is really like a kid in a candy store and a parent trying to keep that kid in check,
Yeah.
it makes this craziness that goes on a lot more rational. It makes more sense.
Yes, but that fight between the brain, whether it be the left brain and the right brain, if that's what we're
Yeah.
talking about, that fight tends to create a ton of anxiety
Yes.
and sense of failure for people. So
Yeah.
again, it is contradictory to itself, right? Because we all just want to feel good, but if we have that resistance of
Yeah.
the one side of the brain that is creative and wants to do things and push us forward, and then we have the other side of the brain going, pause. You
Yeah.
can't do that right now. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the knowledge, skills. We don't have whatever it takes to get that done. That is, to me, where people suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. So when we look at a lot of our issues, whether they're emotional or mental issues, they really come down to this battle because we have this one part wanting to do things. And
Mhm.
when the part that checks to see if it's okay to do doesn't allow us to do it, it creates inner turmoil. It creates feelings like, oh, we're not good enough, or we don't have what it takes, we don't have the discipline. And then it also creates anxiety, like you mentioned, and that anxiety is resistance trying to stop you from doing it. That's where our fear comes from. Because when I talk a lot about resistance, people are like, is that fear? I'm like, no, fear is what resistance uses to stop you.
Got you.
And so when you have anxiety and fear, there's a good chance that you want something, and a part of you is holding you back or stopping you from get it. And so when you feel anxiety or when you feel fear, sometimes it could seem rational out of nowhere, but you got to ask yourself, like, what is it that I want? And it
Right.
could be as simple as safety and security. You might just want safety and security, and a part of your brain doesn't feel like you have it.
And keep putting you in unsafe situations.
Yeah, yeah,
you know? Um,
yeah,
so my next question is, how do we correct this? Because I know there are a lot of us running around here going, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling like we're not worth anything, having imposter syndrome, self diagnosing about having ADHD, ADD. You name the gamut of any type of psychological issues that you can think about. People like self diagnosing because
yeah,
they can't figure out how I can want something. I may want to fold up the clothes on my and that I did for laundry. They're sitting there for 3 weeks. I haven't done it. I may want to start a business. I start doing one thing and then I stop. I don't pick it up for another 3 months. So there's a lot of trepidation around, okay, these are the things I want. I know I could do it, but it comes down like sometimes to motivation. I don't
yeah.
have the motivation. And that's what people would think. I don't have the motivation to do it. But you're saying it could be just the resistance, the capacity of the brain saying to itself, we don't have the physical, mental, emotional capacity to take that on right now.
Yeah, that's more or less what I'm saying. So a person can have motivation and still not be able to do the thing. And it comes down to the fact that resistance comes up and holds them back.
Mhm,
And resistance comes up for many reasons. And it's not just mental, that feeling of like mental capacity.
mhm,
So a lot of times it could be, oh, well, I don't think I could do this, or it might be too dangerous to do it, or there might be challenges. And those are some of the obvious reasons why our brain will hold us back.
right.
But resistance gets really deep, man. And I can share
Okay.
some reasons that might hold a person back that they might not even realize. And one of them, and I think a lot of us experience this, has to do with core needs. So as humans, we have all these core needs like the need for love, affection, attention, and physical contact.
Mhm,
And some of these needs are deeply ingrained into us, like the need for a mother's love and a father's guidance. And when these needs aren't met, it's painful. It hurts a lot. It's a kind of pain that can make a person go crazy. That's how core and deep these needs are.
mhm,
Now, if growing up, these needs aren't met and the brain comes to the conclusion that these needs can't be met, won't be met, or is too dangerous to be met,
mhm.
it makes sense that the brain's going to stop you from going after these needs, right?
Right.
But the problem is, since these are core needs, they don't go away. They just get louder and stronger and more painful. And since the brain believes that this need can't be met or is too dangerous to be met, it feels it has no other choice but to distract us from the pain. And there's many ways the brain will distract us, and one of them is to make our lives difficult, challenging, and keep us from finishing or accomplishing anything. So our focus is always on problems and not the pain.
Not solution. And or solutions. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a really great story to share about this. I knew
Sure.
someone who wanted nothing more in life than the love of his dad, but his
Mhm.
dad never gave it to him. And it hurt him. It hurt him a lot. As a result, he lived a hectic life, living from paycheck to paycheck, never being able to make ends meet.
Mhm.
His brain did that because if his brain could have him finish what he started, it would mean that his life was good. And if his life was good, then this need would be at the forefront of his awareness. But
Mhm.
since his brain felt like this need couldn't be met, it was just distracting himself by creating sabotaging and procrastinating behavior. So his life was always difficult and challenging, so he could avoid the pain. And so a lot of times when we procrastinate and we can't get stuff done is because a part of our brain is processing like, well, if we do this, that means we won't have this worry anymore. And if we don't have this worry anymore, then we have this worry. And if we have this worry that can't be solved, it's just going to create pain. So why don't we just distract ourselves with these kinds of behaviors? So, I mean, this is some of like the deeper underlying things that are holding us back.
Wow. That's really deep. And it's so true because I have found myself in those situations, especially the procrastination. I'm like, why am I procrastinating on getting this specific task done? If I
Yeah.
get it done, it'll be done. It'll be out of my brain. It'll be over. But
Yeah.
I'll wait and wait and wait. And it just builds up a lot of anxiety. And then
Yeah.
at the last minute, I'm putting myself under pressure to get it done. But then when I look back at it, what I was doing was literally distracting myself from a bigger issue that I needed to deal with. So
Yeah.
having this particular issue looming over my head served as a distraction. But when it's happening, you don't realize it.
At all.
No, it's post when you've had
Yeah.
time to sit back and reflect and was like, why did I take, it probably is something that takes you like 20 to 30
Yeah.
minutes to do, but you're acting like it's the biggest task in the world and you just
Yeah.
putting it off and putting it
Yeah.
off. And it
Exactly.
creates this looming anxiety in you because you're like, I have to get this thing done, but I can't get it done. You'll sit down at your desk, you'll try to do it,
Yeah.
and it just won't work. And then when you go back, because I'm a person who loves to self-reflect, and
Yeah.
then I go back and I self-reflect and I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
was avoiding something else.
Yeah. And our brain is so good at making us avoid. And what's really
Mhm,
crazy is, and you hit up on this, is when it's happening in that moment, you don't realize that you're in
mhm,
avoidance behavior. And that's a challenge with resistance. So you can tell somebody, hey, man, you're living a hectic lifestyle from paycheck to paycheck, and you have all these challenges, unable to get to the next step because you have these unresolved needs or these unresolved trauma.
mhm.
And they can never make the connection because the way our brain works is we don't get to really see what's going on in our unconscious that's driving our conscious behaviors, which is why it's called the unconscious.
Conscious, yeah.
And so a lot of times we come to conclusions like we're lazy, we don't have motivation, we're not good enough, or we don't have what it takes. But when the reality is, it's actually none of that. And it's really rarely that for most people. It's usually these deeper things going on. Do you want to hear something, another reason for resistance that's
Yeah,
quite deep?
but 1 minute before we go on
Sure.
to that. So what you just explained, would that be what you call internal resistance?
Yeah, so that's one of so the way I try to explain resistance is
Mhm,
anytime a desire or a want stands before you, that desire gets evaluated by the mind using
mhm.
a whole host of criteria.
Okay,
So it gets evaluated by resistance using a whole host of criteria.
got it.
And if that want doesn't align with any of the criteria, you cannot act. So
Oh,
think about your brain going through a checklist every time you want to do something, and
mhm,
everything has to check off. And if it doesn't, it won't allow you to act. And so one of the things that it checks off is this thing. It's like, hey, will this make our life better? And if it does, then we have to deal with this pain. And so we'd rather not deal with this pain. And so we'll just create resistance. But there's other criteria that come up as well. And
mm.
that's why I was asking, do you want me to talk about another
Oh, yeah,
criteria?
sure.
Yeah. So another criteria is actually quite fascinating. And
Mhm,
I fell into this a lot. and I didn't realize it until I was an adult. But it relates to authority issues. So authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers, and even personal development coaches like myself. I'm going to extend that definition to anyone who tells you or makes you feel obligated to do something. So I have a really cool story. I knew someone whose parents always nagged and pestered him about cleaning his room. They nagged and pestered him so much that he became spiteful towards them and unknowingly carried that spite for decades. So as an adult, he lived a messy life simply out of spite. And he didn't know why he couldn't stay clean and organized until he saw a therapist and he learned that it was triggered by his parents from 20 years ago.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of and when you get to the root of it, it's something that happened way back. And they just developed, okay, this is my resistance to that order that I was constantly given. I've seen that.
And what's crazy is that our authority issues can last a long time. We can go decades or our entire life resisting an authority and consequently not do anything they've ever said or take any advice they've ever given, no matter how long ago they said or gave it. And so what this means is that to this day, in this very moment, we're not able to do certain things only because we're resisting some overbearing mother or father or teacher from years ago. And we don't even realize it. And what's even more is that a lot of our authority issues, we don't even make the decision. The decision's made by our unconscious, and we're just playing out. And here's the kicker with authority issues is that most of our authority issues hurt no one else but ourselves. So when we don't listen to the teacher, it doesn't hurt her grades, it hurts our grades. When we don't listen to our parents, it doesn't affect their health, it affects our health. But the reason we do it is to affect them, not hurt them. We want to like put the salt to the wound. We want to say no because we're upset at them for some reason. And it's crazy. So like a lot of our behaviors, whether it's binging on television or eating junk food, we might think it's because we like television or junk food. But deep down, it could be that we're just trying to give the big FU to all the people who said it was bad for us. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's just like people who partake in emotional eating. Right. I had a friend who did a whole study on that because she realized that her overeating was tied to her emotions. And when she had to dig deep to find out, like, where did this come from? It stemmed all the way back to her being a child.
It was probably because her mom and dad wanted her to eat really well. And she was probably upset and developed authority issues. And anytime the desire to eat well came up, it's like, well, I don't want to satisfy my mom and dad, so I'm going to do the exact opposite. And all these things just happen all in the unconscious, and all we do is find ourselves in this compulsion, unable to stop. And it's opposite too. It's like you talked about not being able to clean. Sometimes, like, we could, as an adult, we want to clean. It's the weekend, we want to organize our house, take the car to the wash, but the authority issues come up because we might be holding resentment from all the people who told us that we needed to be clean and organized and have it all together. And so that's another reason the resistance can come up.
Because as a kid, if Saturday mornings were designated for cleaning, like, you had to scrub the house from top to bottom, right? So now that I'm an adult, I don't like to clean. I love a clean environment, but I don't want to be the one to clean it. So to combat me suffering on the weekends, because that's what I called it, suffering, right? Because I would have to spend hours on my Saturdays cleaning and stuff like that. I just decided to hire a housekeeper. I could not.
We have to find our ways.
When you were talking earlier, you talked about something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it reminded me of, the young man who wanted the love of his father and was living like paycheck to paycheck, had the desire to be successful, but could not be successful. I like to term that as fear of success.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of people that fall in that. And I've never stopped to think about what could be behind their fear of success. Like they have a deep desire to be successful. They have the skills to be successful. They have the tools to be successful. But every time if success is right here, when they get right here, they self sabotage.
Your sabotage, yeah. So you're bringing up a
They
lot of
never
really,
get to the line or
yeah,
over the line. They
yeah,
always stop right here. And I always wondered, like, why are you doing that to yourself?
yeah.
Just take the next step. But what you said makes sense. That's probably some of the things that are going on. I don't know exactly what in each person's situation, but yeah.
Well, if you like, I could talk a little bit more about that because
Sure.
that's
Absolutely.
another reason for resistance. So that's another
Mhm,
criteria. A lot of times our brain will prevent us from doing a task or activity, not because it's making us resist the task or activity, but what finishing or completing it would lead to or bring. So this is a pattern I see a lot with inspiring authors. Many
mhm,
authors want to write a book, tell their story, and get their message out into the world. And now with self-publishing becoming easier than ever, I can give a person some really simple tips and tricks to quickly write and publish a book.
mhm,
Many will start, but very few will finish.
mhm,
Why? Because finishing it will mean confronting something they're trying to avoid, something bigger.
mhm,
That means when you finish the book, you have to market and put yourself out there. And that means exposing yourself to feedback and criticism.
mhm.
And some people aren't ready for the feedback and
No,
criticism. So
no.
they procrastinate and sabotage themselves on the book now so they don't have to deal with the something bigger later.
That's
And this is,
100% accurate for
yeah,
sure.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and this is something that interestingly enough, us men experience a lot
Mhm,
because as men or as humans, we have a strong desire to date, and you know, meet and date and court the opposite sex.
right.
But unfortunately, many men are afraid of women. And so what they'll do is tell themselves, once I have that nice car or big house, I'll feel more confident and comfortable to approach women.
Mhm,
But they'll always procrastinate on getting that nice house or big car or the big nice car, the big house, because doing so will mean they're one step closer to confronting their fear of women. And that nice car and house always becomes the excuse for why they don't approach women. And
mhm.
whenever the desire comes up, they go, well, I don't have that car or house yet, but when I do, so
Right.
yeah.
And at the
So
same time, blame it on the women for not having a woman, but it's you who are blocking your own self.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
in this whole scenario, when you talked about the authority component, right?
yeah, authority issues.
Yeah. How does operational defiance disorder fit into that?
I haven't heard that word in that way said. So
Mhm.
can you define that for me first, and then I
So
could see
it's
how it
a
affects it?
disorder. It's usually diagnosed in kids. So in the tween years, mostly
Yeah,
like between 10-ish to about 14, people really begin to get diagnosed. Then it's when they have. So basically, what you said before. If I tell you to run because I told you to run,
right.
you're
Yeah.
gonna walk.
Exactly. So it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
We're just using different words. I like
Yeah.
using
Hmm.
authority
Hmm.
issues because I think more people can resonate with it.
Yeah.
But when what you said, defiance disorder,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
And in
Opposition.
many,
I think it's oppositional is the first word. Oppositional defiance disorder.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it does start, as we are kind of coming into our own and becoming
Hmm.
more independent. But our parents want us to be more they want to keep us safe
Yes.
and take care of us.
Hmm.
And sometimes we don't realize, and the unconscious doesn't realize, is that as amazing as the human brain and body are, they're at the same time extremely fragile. So very simple things can essentially you know,
Derailers.
derail us or
Yeah.
like end our life, like a
Right.
hard fall, getting hit by a car.
Hmm.
I actually have a really great analogy for this. So
Sure.
we've heard about Alexander the Great, right?
Yes.
He was actually one of the guys who had one of the first to really have a really large empire, and no one could defeat him. It was amazing. He took down like large empires, like the
Hmm.
Persian Empire,
Right.
and he would go into battle with small numbers and defeat much larger armies.
Hmm.
And he died at the age of 30, in his early 30s, by a bacteria so small that you can't be seen with the human eye. So dangers and threats can come out of anywhere
Right.
and big effect on us. And as
Hmm.
a parent, that's what we are conditioned and programmed to do, is like always be protective. But as a child, when we're at the receiving end of it, it gets annoying. It's like, don't
Right.
do this, do that, don't do. And over time, we hear so many no's and don'ts, not because our parents are trying to be difficult and mean, but they're just
Hmm.
trying to protect us.
Right.
But it hears it so much that what happens is anytime it hears don't and no, or from a certain type of person, it
Hmm.
immediately shuts it down and wants to do the exact opposite.
Right.
And because our brain is very associative, so anytime we interact with something or some
Hmm.
whatever, our brain actually triggers our past and sees how to interact with it. So let's say you and I are talking, right? So unknowing to you and unknowing to me, as soon as we interact, our brain is my brain is looking at you and thinking about all the different interactions I've had with people who might have been like you, talk like you, and whatever,
Hmm.
and it's try to predict what kind of person you are. So it can make it easier for me to talk to you.
Hmm.
And now, if somebody who has been told no so many times
Hmm.
interacts with somebody else, their brain is going to go to their past. And if the person that's telling them to do something reminds them of some authority in their past, like a
Hmm.
parent or a teacher, they're going to respond to that person as if they would be responding to the parent or teacher. I
Got
don't
you.
know. It's a little complex what I'm trying
No,
to.
it makes sense. It makes sense because sometimes you interact with people and you're like, you not that you want to tell people how they should react when you're interacting with them,
Yeah.
but sometimes the interaction or the response does not warrant the interaction that happened.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're like, what just happened? Oh my God.
Because
All
they're
I
not
said was
responding to
blah.
you, they're responding to somebody from their past.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I get it. I get it. One of the
Yeah.
things you talk about is tricking, the tricks of resistance.
Yeah.
So we went through internal resistance, the wanting mechanism, the tricks of resistance. How do we fix this?
Yeah, so this is challenging. We haven't fully really gotten into tricks, but I'm going to talk
Okay,
about the
go ahead.
tricks.
Let's go
It's
into tricks first
fascinating.
before we talk about how to
Yeah,
fix it because we need to know how to fix
yeah.
it. Okay.
So the causes of resistance are
Mhm.
quite a lot, and it's difficult to pinpoint the exact one.
Right.
It really like you really need to understand the human brain and psychology, and at a deeper level than most psychologists.
Hmm.
And even then, it doesn't make the problem go away. And that's because if resistance is going to stop you, it's not going to tell you that it is.
Hmm.
So if our core needs is a problem, resistance isn't going to say, well, this thing that you're trying to do will expose us to these core needs that we have.
Hmm.
So instead of doing that, we're just going to sit here and do nothing. Or that thing that you're trying to do will keep us from pissing off authorities. So we're just going to stand back and blend in with the crowd. That's not what happens.
Hmm.
Resistance uses manipulative tricks, and it's really important to understand the tricks your brain uses on you
Hmm.
so you're not manipulated by them. And to really understand what's going on is we've all heard about the fight and flight response, right? It's a response that all animals have down to single cell organism.
Hmm.
And the response either prepares us to stay with the task or to run away.
Hmm.
Now, as we humans have evolved, we're now living in towns and cities, there isn't any place to run away to. We can't run away to someone's house or someone's property.
Mhm.
And even if we did, we couldn't live off their land.
Right.
So when the brain triggers a flight response, it has us run away other ways and with other
Mhm.
activities. And some of the simple ways that makes us run away is distracted behavior like video games and social media and Netflix.
Mhm.
And a lot of times those are tricks your resistance is using to keep you from doing something else. So when you get caught in that, but the tricks get even more sneaky. One of the ways we avoid our brain will have us avoid a certain activity or a goal is by putting it off till later.
Mhm.
And I have a really powerful short story to share about this. Several years ago, I was in South Africa and I heard a woman speak about her journey of addiction. She
Mhm.
described a pattern that many addicts fall into that she herself fell into. She said that many addicts know what they're doing is wrong. When
Mhm.
they're searching for the next hit, a part of them knows that they should stop. Though what prevents them from stopping is a sneaky trick that keeps them perpetually stuck in their addiction forever. And they say, after the next hit, I'll stop. After the next one, I'll stop.
Right.
I just need one more, but after, I'll stop.
Mhm.
When they say it, they're convinced after the next one, they'll stop.
Mhm.
Absolutely convinced. In their mind, they truly believe after the next one, they'll stop.
Right.
And the reason I bring this up is because I know for a fact every single listener right now is doing this in some area of their life. A desire
Absolutely.
comes up, and in that moment, they say, I'll do it later. I'll
Mhm.
do it tomorrow. I'll do it this weekend. I'll do it this week. I'll do it this month. I'll do it next time. And when the later or tomorrow arrives, they
Mhm.
push it off to the next and next and next until one of two things happens.
Mhm.
One, either years go by, they're married, have two kids, a stressful job, and as a result, no more time,
Mhm.
or two, they completely forget the goal. And again, when they say it later, they're convinced that they'll do it later. Absolutely convinced. In their mind, they truly believe, like, yeah, they get to it later, but they never do.
All right.
And so if a person, anytime they're hearing this voice of later or next, they have to be very careful because there's a good chance it won't be a later or next, and their brain is just playing a trick on
Mhm.
them to keep them from doing it now.
Yeah, I totally agree. That happens with a lot of things, losing weight,
Yes.
starting your business, being an entrepreneur. And I see a lot of these different things happen as a business coach, happen with entrepreneurs. And sometimes I get so frustrated and I'm like, just implement, just do it. It's not that hard. Just do it. And
Yeah.
so I know that there are different types of resistance. So what I've been like, okay, if you can't implement yourself, hire somebody to do it
Yeah.
for you. Right? Because it's just like me not wanting to clean all the time. I hired somebody. Anything I don't want to do, if I have the money, I will outsource it.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead of fighting with my brain all day, I mean, some things you do have to face forward, but it takes, and we're going to be talking about that. It does take time to
Yeah.
retrain the brain to act differently. You didn't get there overnight, so it's not going to change overnight. But a lot of the things that you're resisting, you can't continue to resist because your life, the quality of life you have, is going
Right.
to be poor. Am I making sense?
Oh, completely. Your
Okay.
mental,
Yeah.
emotional, your physical life, it's going to be all
Yeah.
affected by it unless we start doing the things.
Mhm.
And I like that you said that it's not going to happen overnight because it doesn't happen overnight, but we expect overnight results. So I don't want people to think that because they
Mhm.
heard this podcast and they understand there's a part of their brain that's holding them back,
Yeah.
that it's going to all just go away. It just takes time. Though it's really important to understand that anytime they do want to do something, but they feel like they can't or they're stuck and they're wondering,
Mhm.
know that it's not because they're being lazy or they don't have what it takes. There's something that's holding them back. And we talked about a few criteria that do, like authority issues and core pains,
Right.
but there's a lot more. And the message that I really want to hit home is that it really doesn't matter what's holding you back, but it's
Mhm.
to look at the patterns of the resistance, the tricks that are coming up.
Mhm.
And, I talked about a couple of the tricks, which has to do with distractions like social media and and video games and television and Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
But then our tricks can be kind of sneaky, like what I just described, this pattern of pushing things off to later.
Right.
And it can get even more sneaky. The stronger the resistance, the more elusive it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
Even things like when we criticize something,
Mm-hmm.
it's a way for our brain to stop us from doing it. Because as soon as we criticize it, we've just created a wall and barrier to wanting it or to going after it. And I want people to know.
I did wonder, but I'm happy that you said that, not to cut you off. Yeah. But I have a few people that I know who do that all the time. And I'm like, the harshness of the criticism of that oppositional, whatever it is sometimes I'm just like, what's this all about? Because it's so, like, it's coming seriously from the soul, the pit of their souls, right? And I'm like, this got to be something else, because this is not normal. You know, there's criticism, and then there is like guttural criticism. And sometimes I see that they react to certain things on a real feral level, and I'm like, what is happening here? Okay.
And now you know what it is. It's resistance. and the more gut and automatic that response is, the more that quick and snappy it is, the more it's an unconscious response that they didn't even logically work through. And they likely don't even
realize they're doing it.
Yeah, they realize they're doing it, or whatever they say, they don't actually believe it. It just kind of came out because this part of the brain just said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not even going to give it a thought. Just shut it down, boom, and it's out. And so what I want people to understand is anytime that they criticize, it means they want that thing.
That's heavy.
It's really heavy. It's really heavy.
That's heavy. I don't think a lot of people are going to like that one.
No one's going to like that one. No one's going to like it.
I don't think a lot of people are going to like that one. Because that is not what people think they're doing. But I believe you, because some of the responses or some of the criticism, there is constructive criticism, but some of the criticisms are so feral. It's like the emotion behind it. I'm like, there's got to be something to this. Are you jealous? Like, what's happening here? But I get that.
And I'll even go as far as to say, like, you know, when we see somebody walk by and we get these like snooty remarks in our head, there's something about that person we're attracted to. It's usually the opposite.
Really? Oh my God.
Or they have something that we want, like they might have the nice job or the nice car and whatever. Because those criticisms don't come out of anywhere. Especially when they're as like gut reaction, like you said.
For real. Oh,
and so one more thing that I want people to understand is ill health can also be a manifestation of resistance. So if we're working on something and we're trying to push through our resistance, and we're like, no, we're not going to let resistance stop us, and whatever tricks are coming up, we're kind of dodging. As a last-ditch effort, our brain can actually, out of nowhere, we'll feel a cold. We'll catch a flu. We might get into an accident.
You're speaking the word right now. I go through that.
Yes.
That one, 100%, I can attest to, happens. I'm like, I was just fine the other day. I'll have something major to do, and all of a sudden, I wake up the next morning and I'm sick. And I'm like, this is not right. How is this happening to me every time I'm about to push over the other edge? I end up getting sick. I said, this has got to be mental. It's got to be mental.
And do you know why? It's because when we're sick, it literally is hard to do anything. And even especially when we're sick, it's like we don't have any energy. And so we rest to recover. And as soon as we rest, we lose the momentum we've been gaining.
Right.
And we've been losing the time that we could be put into it. And it's a perfect way for resistance to hold us back. And I want people to understand that a lot of their health issues could just be because they have this big desire underneath, but they can't go after it because their health is the way resistance is manifesting in their life.
I need to go check that out for myself, because the amount of how sick I am, Like,
Yeah.
I need to really check that out. That could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
exactly what's my problem,
Yeah.
right? My
Like,
body's creating issues because my mind wants to go somewhere else and my brain is telling it, no, I gotta sit down.
yeah. And from talking to you in this interview and then prior to this interview, it seems like
Mhm.
you're a pretty motivated, driven
I
person and you
am.
want to do things. But I think you might have some resistance and it's using
I'm
these things.
sure I do.
Yeah.
I am positive.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Uh,
Because that part of the conversation makes sense. Because I'm always saying to my friend, like, every time I'm about to do something even major, like something I had fear from,
yeah.
and it's a major milestone, a major step forward, I'm like, I end up getting the flu.
Yeah.
I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I didn't go anywhere. How did I get the flu?
Yeah. Or
You
even
know?
injuries and
Yeah,
accidents. Yeah.
yes. Or my back gives out or something happens and I'm just like, "Oh my god, not
Yeah.
again." Like, this
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah. I
I'm
don't
gonna
wanna jinx
definitely
myself,
work on
but
that.
I used to get sick all the time, and
Uh-huh.
now I rarely get sick, and I travel,
Really?
I travel
This is
internationally. I
fascinating.
do some,
Oh my
like,
god.
really out there stuff, but
Uh-huh.
because I'm aware of resistance so much and how it could show up,
Mhm,
and I know that, like, s that was a thing that was an issue for me, and the
mhm,
I've gotten over my own resistance and I'm not as afraid to do things, the less that comes up. Like, I rarely get sick. I've been through some pretty, intense experiences just in the last
mhm,
month.
mhm,
I got affected by the Hurricane Helen,
mhm.
and all of that, and, I just kept pushing through. I'm like, "I'm not gonna let this
Yeah.
hold me back," and
No, you can't.
normally, sickness would start to creep in, but it doesn't
Mhm.
anymore. So,
Okay.
again, I don't wanna jinx myself, but,
Mhm.
it is a big thing, and at the same time, it is I have to be careful what I'm saying because I don't wanna make it seem like all sickness is because of
Right,
resistance.
of course not.
I
Of
can
course
still
not.
yeah, still be rational and
Of
logical and do the
course.
right
Yes,
things, but
yes.
just know that, um, our resistance is I have a saying of it perfectly describes it.
Mm,
Resistance will fight with your efforts until the day you die.
right.
And so unless you handle the resistance, it'll
Mhm.
keep fighting with your efforts, and if it has to make you sick, it will. So, yeah.
Mhm. That's where I think self-reflection comes in, is one of the components to figuring out, is it resistance or is it truly an issue that you're having, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to your health and whatever else. And I do have real serious underlying health issues. So when it happens, I'm never thinking like, oh, okay. But now I'm going to look at it more closely because
Yeah.
I know I have the underlying health issues. So those are not going to go away. But I'm going to be looking at, what am I doing right now? Is it something that I'm doing that's making me feel anxious or something that's could possibly be causing this failure in health that just seemed to have come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
So I think self-reflection has to be a key component in this whole process for
Yeah.
sure.
No, it's huge.
um and then one of the other things I think you talked about that was a key component was your friend went to see a psychologist or a
Yeah.
psychiatrist. So I'm thinking that's one of the tips that you're going to give us about helping to resolve resistance.
I think it helps. Unfortunately, one of my mentors, and I do
Mhm.
agree with him, he says, the problem with most therapists and coaches is that they haven't done their own work. And it's a challenge because you can go see somebody, but if they haven't done their own work, they really
Mhm.
can't advise you as much
They
as
should
best
be.
as they can. So I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's not the best option. I'm
Right.
just saying it's not something you should put all your eggs into.
Okay.
Self-reflection really should be there,
Mhm.
and getting out and understanding what resistance is should also be part of the thing. And really understanding how the brain works should also be a really good thing to add uh, to what a person does to help themselves to understand what's going on and to overcome it. Now, I do want to talk about a cycle of how I help people overcome
Okay.
internal resistance. And
Mhm.
there's different models I use. One model is I look at how they take action.
Mhm.
So some people are really good at getting motivated and excited about stuff. but they never start. They just get excited about one thing and another, right?
Right.
Other people, they can start, but they stop before making much progress. That's a second. Some people will make really good progress, but right before they get to the end, they fall off or they sabotage themselves.
Yep.
And then there's other people who can actually get to the finish, but they stop doing the things that got them to the finish. So their behavior and their results start to dwindle. And this is where you see the yo-yo dieting. It's like we work until we get the results, and then we stop, and then we lose it, and we work, and then whatever.
Right.
And so it really helps to look at where the person is at and then give advice based on that. So for a person who gets excited about a lot of stuff but never starts on anything, what I would tell them is to pick one want and cut out all the rest. No matter what other desires your brain is producing, don't think about, worry about, and don't consider any of them until the first is finished and completed. That would be their solution. For a person who's good at starting and stopping and then starting and stopping is to use a technique that I got from meditation. So there's all kinds of meditations, but a lot of them really focus on clearing your thoughts or holding on to one thought. And it's hard to do either for an extended period, but that's not really the goal. The goal is to try as much as you can. And when you fall off, to jump right back in.
Right.
So you're trying to keep your head clear of thoughts, and thoughts enter. Don't beat yourself up. Just clear them again and try to see how long you can go. When thoughts enter again, don't beat you up. So for these people, it's if they start something and they fall off, don't beat yourself up. Just jump right back in. And then keep going until you fall off again. And then when you fall off, just jump right back in. For the people who do get to the near finish, but then sabotage themselves, what's really important for them to do is to build a muscle of taking something from the start to the finish. So the way we humans are built is that we need to build muscle for things, for something to become easy. But we also need to build muscle to start things. We need to build muscles to stick with things. And then need to build muscles to complete things. And for a person who's really good at like starting and sticking with, but then they just don't finish it, they need to build a muscle of it. They need to get into the habit of just like, no matter what it takes, just completing it. And once they get that going, they'll be able to do it with other stuff. And then for the person who does get to the end, and then they stop doing what got them there, you need to understand that success is much harder to keep than to achieve.
Very true.
So it seems like success is hard to achieve and then it becomes easy, but it's hard to achieve and then it gets harder to keep it. And to understand that, otherwise they'll think, oh yeah, I did the hard work and now I can relax. And as soon as they do, they just they start progressing.
Right.
But that's not it. They got to put even more work to keep that momentum going. And there's an important reason why that is, because when we're going after something, there's actually an inner drive and push that we have. Like we enjoy the chase and the hunt and we're going after it. And once we achieve it, that inner drive and push goes away. And so we have to come in and take over and make sure that we continue that inner drive and push in the absence of it. So that's one model I use. There are other different models, but I think it's a good thing, a framework that people can start applying right now.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to wrap up. And so my last two questions for you. The first one is, what makes you an impactor?
For me is trying to evolve our thinking and our understanding of stuff. I was never somebody who wanted to just read or take what someone else has said or figure it out. I wanted to bring my own take into it. And I think internal resistance is a concept that hasn't really been talked about. It's something I have developed. And at first I developed for myself. And when I realized everyone is experiencing it, it was something I felt like I wanted to bring out and bring it out to the world. So I think that's what makes me an impactor, is trying to evolve our thinking and understanding of the human mind and what makes us tick, and try to get that message out there.
Awesome. If you had to leave the audience with 3 tips or strategies for getting beyond resistance or identifying their resistance, what would those 3 tips or strategies be?
Okay, so one is to know that wanting doesn't lead to having. Just because you want something doesn't mean you'll take the necessary steps to get it. And that's because we have a part of our brain designed to hold us back.
Mhm.
2 is when you're working with resistance, you got to throw all the other tips and advice out the window, because those are all, a lot of the tips and advice is really meant for maximizing results and maximizing your efforts.
Mhm.
When we're dealing with resistance, it doesn't work. With resistance, it's about trying to get ourselves to do the thing, right? It's about taking the simplest actions that lead to the biggest result.
Mhm.
And then 3 is, if there was something simple I can give, because resistance isn't, the human mind and body are complex. So when we're dealing with resistance, it's not simple and easy. Like, we just scratch the surface of it. But if there was something that could really make a profound shift in a lot of people's lives, if they implemented this one thing, it would be self-talk. And self-talk are pretty much statements that you say or repeat to yourself of the changes that you want to have or have happen. For example, if you want to be a more assertive person, you would repeat statements like, "I'm strong and assertive. I communicate my needs and wants." Now, you may not think repeating that statement could do much, but it's huge. If a person just did that and nothing else, they would start to become much more assertive over time. So I created a statement, and it took me 15 years, writing 12 books, traveling to over 100 countries to narrow it down to this one statement. And if people repeat it, I promise them it will help them get over their resistance and have them doing more. And it's, are you ready for it?
I am.
Okay. I'm a do it now person. I do things now. I finish things right away.
Mm.
One statement. Just repeat it in your head all the time. You can repeat it when you're going to bed, when you're waking up, waiting in line, in the shower, driving, cooking, cleaning. That's how I do it. That's how I've traveled to 100 countries, written 12 books, and done amazing things like snowboarding, scuba diving, rock climbing, dancing, yoga, so much more, is because I have this thing running in my head all the time. So I'm a do it now person. I do things now. I finish things right away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kam, for being here. Can you please tell the audience how they can get in touch with you if they want to utilize your services, book you for speaking engagements, or whatever other services that you offer?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I am author of a dozen best-selling books. They can check out my books at kamknight.com. I also I'm an international speaker. If people like me to speak, they can reach out to me at kamknight.com as well. There's a contact form. And I have a course called Conquer Internal Resistance that talks about this exact topic, but it goes much deeper. Like I said, we just scratched the surface of it. We didn't even talk about our wants, the part of the brain that creates the wants, because our wants can be the very thing that keeps us from getting them. And we only talked about 2 criteria the brain uses to hold us back. There's a dozen more, and we only discussed a handful of tricks, but there's several dozen tricks that our brain uses to keep us from doing the things that we want. And then
Right.
there's tips and techniques of how to overcome it. So if they want that course, they can get it at kamknight.com as well.
Okay, awesome. Kam, thank you so much for being here with us today. The information was enlightening. It made me think about a lot of things in a
Yeah.
whole new light. And I know that our audience, especially our entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of them suffer with a lot of the issues you talked about with
Yeah.
resistance. And that's why they're not where they should be in their businesses. So thank you again so much for being here. And again, reach out to Kam if you're looking for someone to come out and speak at an event that you're having or take his class, right? And that's again is at kamknight.com. All right. Bye everyone. Until next time.
Have a good one, guys.